Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Functional Fighters podcast. In a moment, you're going to hear the intro to our show, and you're going to hear us say the wrong name.
That's because just before we published the very first episode, we found out somebody else beat us to the punch.
Pun fully intended.
So we needed to find a new name.
And since we're overachievers, we had recorded several episodes before we discovered this. So we will have it fixed a few episodes in. We live, we learn, and now on with the show.
Hello, world. I'm Dan McCarthy.
I'm Brian Basaga.
And welcome to another episode of Striking Thoughts.
This is our podcast about martial arts as it relates to self-defense, practical applications, theory, history, applicability in the modern world. And as always, our aim is to help make everyone a better martial artist.
So we decided for this episode we were going to make the topic Bruce Lee. And do we need another icon in the self-defense martial arts such as Bruce Lee? So I think this will be a really interesting topic because I think there's a lot for the two of us really to kind of examine about who Bruce Lee was and what he did for us to begin with.
Yeah, I think Bruce Lee is, one of those guys that, a modern legend, right? I mean, go down in the history books kind of guys. There's a lot to talk about if you want to talk about Bruce Lee. But I think what we want to try and keep it to is, what impact did Bruce Lee really have on the martial arts industry? Specifically, I would say, our slant is against, or towards, practical martial arts, self-defense based martial arts. And so I think that's kind of where this discussion has to start. So what did he do for us?
Yeah.
That we want to, and do we need to replicate that, or could we benefit from something like that again?
Right. Yeah, I think that is because I'm sure could just sit and gush over Bruce Lee all night long, without even really getting to the point of it being about self-defense. Because we could talk about his movie career, we could talk about the kind of person he was in terms of physical fitness, and never even really say, hey, what did he do for the martial arts? So that is, of course, what this podcast is about. So that's where we're going to kind of lean ourselves towards. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say, one other thing I'll say, I think, there's probably a generation of martial artists who don't know a lot about Bruce Lee. And we can't really cover, everything in this podcast, at least not in a single episode of this podcast. But one thing I'll recommend for our listeners is, if you don't know anything about Bruce Lee, or if you want a crash course on Bruce Lee, check out the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary. So I think it was 2 hours long. And I think for spending 2 hours on the life of this icon, it did a great job of just putting the whole context of Bruce Lee together. So it could be a good place to go start.
That would be a good place to start. Another thing to look at is there's actually quite a bit of written material on Bruce Lee. He was a pretty prolific author considering how young he was when he died. Just for the record, I think that warrants discussion, at least putting out there, especially because of what you said, in terms of there may be some of our listeners who don't necessarily know a lot about Bruce Lee. They've heard the name, but you got to understand Bruce Lee was 32 years old when he died. So I'm already 11 years older than Bruce Lee ever got to. And I would say I haven't accomplished anywhere near as much with my life as he did. So you got to really pay some serious respect to the man, because he was a genius in many ways in terms of all the things he was able to make happen in the short time he had on this planet. And it has been very close to 50 years since he died. I think we're at about 47, I want to say. I do think he died in 1973. So, we're very much coming close to him being gone for an entire 50 years, and yet people are still willing to talk about him. So that should kind of tell you that he he had some level of a mark on the 20th and the 21st centuries.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say he was the, first martial arts celebrity. I mean, I think, there were a lot of famous fighters, mainly, especially in the United States, a lot of famous boxers and stuff like that.
Sure.
But certainly he's the first martial arts celebrity that I think of, right? Like, chronologically, the first one that comes to my mind.
Right.
We've had many since then, but I would say none of them have really done anything for the self-defense martial arts awareness, right? I mean,
right.
That's just my opinion. Somebody else had a different one.
He ran in the same circle as a lot of other greats, and one of the best to bring to the forefront, of course, is the wonderful Chuck Norris. I think you and I could both. I'm going to guess we would agree on this statement that although Chuck is a very well-known martial arts movie actor, he's not somebody who I think of in terms of self-defense. Not that he wouldn't be able to defend himself. I don't know him as somebody who is well known for his teaching specifically of practical self-defense and things like that.
No, I agree. I mean, I think, you can go down that list. Like Chuck Norris was a great, we'll call him a kickboxer, right? I mean, he was a ring fighter, right? A tournament fighter kind of guy, and one of the best ever. I mean, and then Bill Wallace was another guy, I've had the pleasure of training directly with Bill Wallace a couple of times. I know you have too. We were there together, right? So, these guys are just like, they're incredible, right? But it's not the same. I mean, they are in a different corridor of the martial arts building, so to speak, right?
That's a very true statement. I mean, I'm very privileged that I've spent a lot of time with Bill Superfoot Wallace, just like you have. But I've also had some candid time with him off the mat. I've been his driver a couple of times for a couple of events, and I've had dinner with him a couple times, things like that. And first off, Wallace is a fantastic human being. He's a lot of fun. He's a great instructor. He's quick, even at the age he's at now. He's still really quick and really snappy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kicks me in the head if he decides he's going to do it. He does it, which is very humbling for me. But even Bill Wallace, I have to say I hold him in high regard in many ways, especially humility, because he very flat out. We'd done one of those double impact seminars where it was Grandmaster Pellegrini teaching self-defense, and it was Wallace teaching his Superfoot system of kickboxing and ring fighting. And Wallace didn't have any problem whatsoever with kind of saying this is a different animal from self-defense. And he was very reluctant to kind of give any kind of brash talk of how well he would handle himself in the street or anything like that. Not to say that he would be incapable of it, but he was very willing to acknowledge that ring fighting and street fighting for self-defense were completely different animals, and what he really was accustomed to and practiced was ring fighting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he is very candid about that. I remember him telling me one time, well, not just me, but the group that we were training with at the time, like, I don't want to misquote him, but basically what he said was, I know I can kick a guy really hard and really fast, but I don't actually know what I would do if someone attacked me on the street, because I've never had to do that. I've never tested any of my stuff in that situation, right? It's like, yeah. I just don't know. And this is coming from a guy who, even at the age that he's at, he can tell you, I'm going to kick you in the head with my right leg, and it's coming, and you still can't stop it, right? I mean, he's that good still. Like, imagine what he was like, in the 80s when he was winning tournaments left and right. It had to be really thing to see. But yeah, very practical. And I think that's where Bruce, was different than all the other martial arts celebrities I can really think of, because his system was based on being effective in the street, right? I mean, it looked great on the screen. There was a lot of stuff he did with that in martial arts cinema that was, very awesome, right? I mean, those movies are still great today, right? From a martial arts perspective. And that's the thing. I don't know if anybody's ever really done that again. Like, you go through the 80s and into the 90s with the martial arts stars. You had, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah, Seagal was maybe the closest, although it's difficult to find really practical Aikido that way. It's not that it's not out there, but maybe he was the closest. I mean, Van Damme was a kickboxer. Jason Statham, I think, is more of a sports martial artist than a practical self-defense martial artist. So I don't exactly know what his training background is.
Yeah.
The Rock is just a big guy that blows stuff up. So even though he's maybe the best action movie star we've had in a long time, he's never a martial arts star, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people I can think of that kind of fill that role of the martial arts movie star or the martial arts movie actor and all that. But once you cut the camera, there's not necessarily a lot of talk about them outside of that realm. Where that is where Bruce Lee kind of differs, So the interesting thing. And of course, he is, even to this day, you get a couple of martial arts instructors who are over our age, because, you and I, even at our age, we're still post Bruce Lee. He was dead before you and I started walking this earth, let alone before you and I started doing martial arts. But you talk to instructors who were 15 to 20 years older than us, and there's going to be some controversy. There will be controversy of, oh, well, Lee didn't do anything really for the martial arts. It wasn't already being done. Or Lee was a genius and he was an innovator. And there's a lot of people who think that, oh, he wasn't as good as people say he was, or whatever. And, a lot of that is speculative. And obviously there's no ability for us to test that. We can't do anything about that at this point in time, and a lot of that is really kind of he said, she said stuff. And 40 some years later, it's really easy to be able to go, yeah, I could have taken Bruce Lee, sure. I mean, you can't challenge that, you know what I mean? But so we got to kind of push that stuff to the side. And where was the martial arts in the 1960s when he came about? What was the state of the martial arts at that point in time? Because that's basically what tells us what he did.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of boxing gyms, right? And there were some, as I think we talked about in an earlier podcast, there were a lot of guys who had been overseas largely with the military, right, who brought back, whatever they learned while they were over there, and, highly Americanized it.
Yeah.
Which is, that's not a bad thing necessarily. All throughout the history of martial arts, that's what's happened, right? People learn stuff somewhere, bring it home, and change it, right? That happens.
Yeah. Well, but that era for the martial arts was what they call the blood and guts era, in terms of like competition, because that is the day and age when the martial arts tournaments were just getting kind of figured out over in the West. I mean, they were barely a thing in Asia. You know what I mean? They were barely a thing in Japan. And other places at that point in time. Suddenly we were doing them over here, and there was a lot to figure out. I mean, that's when Jun Rhee was kind of making his name, and lots of other people in addition to that. I mean, sparring gear didn't exist yet. Um, and so a lot of people got hurt, and that was a lot of reason to go to tournaments. Was you could sign up, you could really hit somebody, you could get in there and square off, and you could pop each other, and there wasn't necessarily a lot of regulation yet in terms of what could and couldn't be done. I've watched some videos of guys like Joe Louis, rest his soul. What Joe Louis, he's that same group as Chuck Norris and Bill Wallace. He was fighting in the same age as a heavyweight fighter, and was just a real brawler, real tough dude. I've watched video footage of his fights, and those guys would just beat each other, something fierce, compared to the kind of tournaments we see in martial arts nowadays, outside of like MMA. I mean like the point fighting karate tournaments, when I say that. There was a lot going on at that point in time. Ed Parker's Kempo was...
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up,
Yeah, a real big deal. So there was a lot happening, a lot gelling in the martial arts, and a lot going on in the United States culture. I mean, we were dealing with tensions in the East, because we had both we had the Korean War, and then right after that, a few years later, we had the Vietnam War. So here's these two wars that the United States gets involved in, that are both based in Asia, while at the same time we're bringing back troops who are being trained in Asian combat arts and things like that. And it was a very interesting time.
Yeah, there was a lot going on at that time that made it difficult. I mean, and that, from a martial arts perspective, I think is another thing that, Bruce Lee's skill in the martial arts ultimately overcame all of that anti-Asian bias at the time in this country, right? I mean, it wasn't easy for him. Like, he had to, bootstrap all of that, but ultimately, like, he showed everyone that, greatness transcends, right? And he got through, at a time when there were no other Asian people in anything but bit parts in Hollywood. There were caricatures of themselves, right? Until Bruce Lee came along and kind of changed that. So I think, that shows you. So what was the example that he set there? I mean, it shows you that, skill and perseverance can overcome a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Which is an attitude that you have to succeed in the martial arts, because it's not easy to learn, and you don't learn it overnight. It takes you time.
Right.
But I think the stuff that I just think about the stuff. So breaking through and making martial arts visible to society in that way, I think was, that's what the martial arts celebrity does for us, right? As an industry, a martial arts industry, right? A lot of people find their way to us because they saw something in a movie, or they see something on TV, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds so cool," maybe I could learn how to do that. They go find a local martial arts school and they try something out. 5% of them stick, and go on and continue training, right? But still, that's one thing they do for the martial arts industry. I think the different thing about Bruce Lee is his work in the martial arts has impacted a lot of the actual martial arts, right? I mean, he was at a time when, and it's still true today, a lot of martial arts is like, our way is the way, there is no other way. You do exactly what I say, exactly how I say it, exactly when I say it. And that is the system, right? Bruce Lee's life in the martial arts was about learning all the things that work from different places and figuring out how to put them together.
Right? Very much so.
And I think in a modern, we're talking about our modern world today, self-defense is not a one-size-fits-all thing, right? I mean, you have to have that same attitude that he had, where you need to you need to know something about fighting with your hands, and you need to probably it would be a good idea to know something about fighting with weapons. And it's probably a good idea to know something about the legality of fighting with either of those things, right? And or at least develop your own morality around fighting. And that was definitely, I think, the attitude that he had, and it has influenced many of the current martial arts systems that are out there.
Well, one of the things that's really cool about reading any of Bruce's work, I mean, if you've read the Tao Jeet Kune Do, or if you've read any of his notes beyond that, because there is a lot of things that he wrote that didn't get finished in his lifetime that have been put out posthumously.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most interesting things that is different about his writing, and I've can't tell you how many martial arts books I've read over the year. I've read so many books on the martial arts that were, here's how you do these katas.
Instructional books, right?
Yeah, here's an instructional book on this move follows this move, or here's our philosophy, or here's our code of conduct, and blah 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 blah. Okay, whatever. Bruce's Tao of Jeet Kune Do is one of those books that kind of highlights what we talked about in our last episode, which was when we started talking about principles and strategy and tactics, and Bruce got into that stuff. And why do I want to do something, and what's the general category of something? Like as a case in point, trapping, right? Trapping as a concept to you and me is just kind of a given. It's just kind of a given. And, maybe at some point in time in the martial arts prior to where we are now, it was a given as well. But I can also tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's a point in martial arts history, modern martial arts history, where this wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? Or trapping wasn't something that a lot of people were talking about because of the homogenization of the martial arts, or the watering down of the martial arts, and the misrepresentation of techniques as they've been taught, or misremembering, or whatever. There's definitely a lot of layers and elements to martial arts technique that were lost at some point in time, or ignored, or downplayed. It's hard to say what it is, but trapping is one of those things that maybe nowadays we kind of take for granted, as this is a given, that Bruce didn't invent it. He didn't invent the concept, but he kind of reminded everybody, hey, this is a thing. And then a lot of other martial arts went, oh yeah, we do that too.
Right. That's cool. We do that too.
Yeah, I don't think that was necessarily true at the time, so much as they went, crap, that's a really good idea. Either that, or there are other people who knew legitimately that was a thing, and they made it a point to bring that to the forefront after Bruce kind of popularized it.
Yeah, I mean, I think people want to see, like we've talked about before, I saw this in a movie. Can you teach me how to do that? Right. Yeah. I mean, they don't even know what it is they want to learn, other than it looks cool or seems effective in the movie. So certainly from an industry standpoint, you try and do what you can within your knowledge set to cater to what your potential clientele wants, right?
Well, everybody in our age group knows what the crane kick is.
Yes, right.
Right. Everybody in our age group knows what the crane kick is, and you don't ever have to have ever stepped into a martial arts school. You all know what it is. But to Taekwondo, that's just a jump front kick is what we call it. That's all it is, right? It's nothing special to a Taekwondo stylist in the least bit, unless you want to put your hands up like this, and then it suddenly looks like the move from the Karate Kid movie.
That's right.
That's like a yellow belt level technique in Taekwondo. It's not a big deal as far as we're concerned. It's fun. But yeah, if somebody walks in and says, "Can you teach me the crane kick?" Hell yeah, I can. Of course I can. Darn right I can.
Absolutely true. Yeah. So I mean, getting back to Bruce, like, and do we need another Bruce Lee? Like, what does that even look like today? Like, what is someone going to do? I mean, the thing the thing that sticks out in my mind on this topic is just, well, I'll go back a step here really quick. Like what I would like is, I would like someone to bring awareness of martial arts to more people,
Mm-hmm.
and with that bring an understanding of what martial arts really is, right? Like today, a ton of people find their way to the martial arts through the UFC, right? Or one of those, similar. There's several different, cage fighting type of,
K1.
Bellator and all those guys out there. They're all a similar product at this point, right? And so
Right.
what do they know? They know, okay, this is martial arts is wrestling somebody to the ground and doing submission holds, right? That certainly is martial arts, right? Not denying that it is, but um, again, that's based on sport, right? There's
Right.
rules in the ring. There's things you can do and things you can't do, and there's not the same aspect of morality in the ring either, because you got two consenting people, and they knew what could happen when they went in there, right? And I think it just changes the moral game a bit, and the training that you go through, with that as the basis, has that as an assumption, right? Like, hey, everybody knows why they're here, and everybody knows what's going to happen. Self-defense martial arts is different, right? It doesn't prepare you for the being, you're fine 1 second, the next second you're in a fight for your life, and the things that you're going to do to people, to stop that can be pretty violent, and have some pretty long lasting impacts. I think good self-defense martial arts training touches on all of that stuff, and I think Bruce was very real about all of that, right? He put stuff together that worked, and he talked about when and how to use it and when not to. And I don't think we have that today. Right? I don't think we have anybody who's doing anything like that for us today.
Well, the thing is, he was such an interesting um, mix of attributes all at the same time. I don't. I would concur with you. We don't have somebody like him because I don't think there's anybody that is out there currently that is all of his attributes. We got plenty of
Right.
martial arts movie actors out there, plenty of them who are amazing actors and even good technicians and things like that. But they're not out doing what we do and teaching seminars on self-defense, or at least not like to a level that they're talked about. Maybe they are, but I don't ever hear people talking in Black Belt magazine about so and so's opinions on self defense. No, I
Yeah.
don't hear anybody talk about Donnie Yen's uh, practical martial arts technique. Great martial arts movie actor. Actually, I know nothing about him other than what I've seen him do in his martial arts movies. So I can't speak at
Yeah.
all to his qualifications in terms of self defense. So that's not a comment for or against him.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side of there's the practical martial artists like you and me, and well, obviously you and I are nobodies. To the general populace of the world. Nobody's going to see you or me walking down the street and want our autograph. And there's no reason for anybody to believe just by seeing us that they should think in any way, shape, or form that they should take seriously what you and I say about self-defense, right? But you
Mhm.
saw Bruce Lee and you knew him from his movies and you knew that he did all this stuff, and there was at least a reason to sit and listen to him, whether you agreed or disagreed with him. There was obviously at least a reason for you to hear what his argument was.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting I've interesting progression that can happen, because today, and again, I'm not singling out any specific celebrity or actor or anything like that, but um, today I think the martial arts, especially the tournament style, or the uh, the show style martial arts like XMA and all that kind of stuff. They're they're a path to celebrity for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? A similar an analogy I can give here is like what's going on with culinary school, right? Like if you go back 15, 20 years to like the Food Network, right? Like who were the people on the Food Network? They were like Emeril Lagasse, who how did they decide to put him on the Food Network? Well, he had a string of super successful restaurants across the nation, right? So like, well, let's get this guy and put him on TV. And you know, they there were people who started in food because that's what they love to do, and they earned success and fame because of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now a large portion of the people going to culinary school going there with the idea that I'm going to learn how to be a TV chef, right?
Sure, that's a good way of looking at that.
Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, if you could make that work, make it work, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I think Bruce again was just he just stands out maybe. And again, I'm not saying everybody on screen today did that, but it was clear from Bruce's life and the way he lived his life that martial arts was a thing for him long before any view on fame or fortune, right? Like he used movies as a way to bring awareness to the stuff that he really cared so much about and felt so strongly about, and not as a not the other way around. It was one was the ends and one was the means, and other people put them in different order.
As opposed to like say a modern actor who's going out for a superhero role, right? I mean, there's plenty of actors who if you sign on to a Marvel franchise, you're gonna learn martial arts,
Right. Yeah.
But maybe that wasn't what they started with. They were just an actor who got cast in a role, and then so they had to pick up this skill. And then there are people like Keanu Reeves, who's genuinely been transformed by the martial arts. Is a huge proponent of the martial arts, even when he's not using them in a movie role. Same thing with Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. uses every chance he gets to practice his Wing Chun skills and put those into a movie. Now that he's been doing it for so long, he adores it, and it's a part of who he is outside of his acting career. Did you know Ed O'Neill, Al Bundy? He's a BJJ practitioner.
I did know that. Yeah, I've seen there's images of him in full gi and everything
Yeah.
out on the internet there.
Yeah, he like hardcore. He's like really hardcore about it. He loves it. But again, that's it, you wouldn't know that from his acting career. It's like the two are, separate from each other, which of course is totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, I see like martial arts and how it affects individual people all the time. Like I know how it affected me. I know how it affects my family and some of my students, and just how much of a positive impact it can have. And I think, I think everyone should do it, right? You can't make anything like this compulsory, of course, but certainly you should at least give it a try. And if you stick with it, it pays benefits. And I think that just getting people over that hump is so hard, right? And someone who could do it in an inspirational way, like a Bruce Lee, I think could have a benefit, could have that benefit of just getting people in and, getting people started.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is there is something really interesting going on in terms of martial arts media right now, and that's Cobra Kai. And I'm sure I wouldn't offend either William Zabka or Ralph Macchio by saying they're not, real martial artists. They're actors, right? They're actors who are cast as martial arts characters, and yes, of course, they have some level of training for their roles. That's for sure. I'm not trying to say they haven't done any level of training. Clearly, they have to for what they do, but they're not like you and me who step out on the mat every week and are training because they want to train. They're doing it for a role. But at the same time, what I'm enjoying about Cobra Kai is the interesting things that they're trying to throw in there in terms of life lessons and all that I think very much could bring people walking into the dojo as they start to see that. And maybe Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence aren't going to be the iconic characters that change somebody's life in terms of self-defense, but at the same time they might be something that gets someone in the door of a dojo so somebody like you or me can do it. I don't know. The thing about this is like I said, just this interesting mix of person that Bruce was so ahead of his time and so different,
Yeah, right. He was an innovator in the technical martial arts. He was an inspirational person just in life in general, right?
Yeah.
And so it's rare to put all of those things together. And we may never, if we want another one, if we think we need another one, we may never have the opportunity to get one, right?
That's my fear, actually, is regardless of what the answer is to this question, I don't really believe that's in the cards that it's going to happen again. I don't know that we'll ever have the perfect storm that creates another Bruce Lee. The political environment's very different. The media environment is very different. Self-defense laws are different. All that kind of stuff. Martial arts schools are very different. It's not that hard to find a school that practices, at least in some way, shape, or form, some of the philosophical, if not technical, elements that Bruce was, espousing. We do.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Bruce was a collaborator. He didn't just teach his own stuff. He had a really good partner in things in Dan Inosanto, whom we haven't mentioned yet. But, Bruce didn't just have his background in Wing Chun to pull from. He also had Dan Inosanto's Filipino martial arts training, and the two of them really did a lot of work together to create Jeet Kune Do. Bruce is the one everybody thinks of, but if you are not new to the martial arts, then you've probably heard the name, at least, Dan Inosanto. He's a big part of that puzzle that sometimes is not readily recognized because he wasn't, a movie star.
Yeah, going back to something you said a few minutes ago, it's really a scary thought to say that like society today wouldn't allow another Bruce Lee to happen. But it may be true, right? There's just so much just with social media and the idea that, you either love something or it's irrelevant, right? It's you either matter or you don't, I'll incorrectly use the term cancel culture, I guess, but the idea that like you look for reasons to tear something down now, right? Like at the time,
I don't think you use that incorrectly. I think my own stance on cancel culture would be exactly what you just said. That is what I think very much is the case. One of my best friends actually mentioned that, completely unrelated to this topic. We were talking about politics in general and the fact that you can no longer disagree with somebody or you're canceled. If your opinion is unpopular, then you're canceled. And so this will be our last podcast because somebody will disagree with what I just said there. Right. And that'll be the end of it for us because we'll get blacklisted on YouTube because of that fact. But that's a hard thing to people have learned have stopped learning how to disagree with each other in an open and honest manner. I
Yes,
think
and
that's
then
actually
move on with your life, right? I mean, that's the part. Like disagreeing with people, we're really good at that as society. Still, we can find any reason to disagree, but what we can't do is figure out a way to live knowing that someone is out there who disagrees with us. Right? It's tough.
or to even be constructive about that. I mean, I actually I like to disagree with people. Anybody who knows me on a personal level can say I can be fairly contrary in my thinking, and I don't really do it to be a jerk, but I have a very moderate opinion on things. So regardless of which direction you lean, if you're an extremist, I tend to challenge you. And that's because my own personal philosophy would be that if you're over here on the right, you're really missing some good stuff here on the left. And also vice versa. If you're over here, I want you to come back a little bit to the right and try to find the middle ground, because I like that moderate point of view a lot more, because I think that's, what is this podcast about? It's about martial arts. So I really believe in balance. I don't like things going too far in any direction. I think that's chaotic, and I think it's destructive and disruptive to society. So I really do believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a time, trying to keep politics out of this as much as possible. We're filming this podcast in the fall of 2020, and we're still surviving this pandemic era here, right? And people are afraid. I mean, they're just afraid. They're afraid of everything, right? I mean, they're afraid of the virus. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of protests. They're afraid they're going to be, persecuted by the police or the government or something, right? I mean, people are just really on edge right now.
Yeah.
And you see, you see people buying like firearms in record numbers, right? Like
Right.
more firearms have been sold. I saw something in the news. I don't remember the exact. Multiple times the normal number of firearm sales are going on right now, right? And that's another sign. People are looking for a way to protect themselves, and firearms can be an important part of your overall self-defense philosophy if you're willing to be responsible and get educated about it. That can be a good thing to do. But most of those people don't even know that there are options in addition to that.
Yeah. Right.
And I just think you get, as you train in the martial arts, like you get this idea of, understanding what, how to react to things that are out of your control, right? Like 20 years of martial arts experience, and I know I cannot directly control whether someone is going to come and attack me or not. But I know if they do, I have options.
That's the key right there. Yeah.
And just that little bit of knowledge, a little bit, right? Just goes a lot to take the edge off of that anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with, I just wish we could bring that to more people.
Well, the end to dovetail on what you just said right there, I'm going to make our producer here extremely happy because I'm going to quote him. This is one of his lessons that he likes to impart, and it was part of his lesson tonight while I was observing, which is control and choice are the same thing. Okay, so that ability to make a choice is having control. And if you're a self-defense practitioner, that means to a certain degree you're a control freak. That's what I've learned in practicing self-defense is that, I already knew it about myself. I already was aware of the fact that I was kind of a control freak, but it really is a factor of being able to defend yourself is that you want to be in control of the situation. You want to take the chaos and you want to be able to affect some change so that it isn't chaotic. So control and choice are the same thing.
Yeah, really, it's it's an excellent way to put it. There's certainly very, in the grand scheme of things, there are very few things we can actually dictate the outcome to, but we have a lot of choices about how we respond to them, right? And that's where we find our power, so to speak.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about Bruce Lee and we've talked about other elements of martial arts that maybe he touched on, and what the outcome has been. My personal thoughts on this point in time is: do we need another Bruce Lee? Yeah, absolutely. We could really use another Bruce Lee. Are we going to get one? I don't think so. I don't think we have the right climate for another Bruce Lee to be born. But boy, do I really wish so.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, there's two aspects of Bruce Lee that I'll focus in on, and I'll kind of answer for them separately. I think, um, that person, that celebrity, that face that brings martial arts um, into the forefront in a different way than it's being brought out today. Certainly, I would love to have another one of those.
The icon.
We may never get it again in that way, right? We may never get it the same way that Bruce did it before. There'll be martial arts stars, but not the same way that Bruce was.
None that are telling you it is like a finger pointing to the moon. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think society is just too commercial for that now. I don't think it'll ever happen again. But then the other side of Bruce was, he was an innovator in the martial arts as it related to self-defense, and that's still somewhat happening today, right? I mean, there are people out there who are developing, updating strategies and tactics and stuff we've talked about previously, right, to mesh with the modern world. So do we think, we'll ever see that on a celebrity scale again? I don't know where it's happening. Like, martial science is progressing. It never stopped, right? People are always looking at new things. The military is a big source of that, in a different way than, traditional martial arts would be. But do we see someone, Bruce Lee created his own system. There have been a number of systems created by people since then, right? Some of them are good and some of them are not so good, right?
Yeah.
I'd be interested in your thoughts on, where's the next big innovation going to come?
Well, here's just what you said. The last couple of minutes kind of made me think of something that I'll throw out there that is kind of. It's hard to say it's the exact same thing, but probably the closest analog I can come up to is what's called KFM, or Casey Fight Method. Are you familiar with this?
Don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well, you are. I know you're familiar with it because you've seen it, whether you realize it or not, because that is the system that was trained in and used in the Dark Knight trilogy. Two guys invented their own modern martial art system that is supposed to be kind of the same idea. It's supposed to be something that is, meant for self-defense in the street and practical and all that kind of stuff. And that was the system that they brought in specifically for Christian Bale to learn to be Batman. And that was, a lot of it was, hey, he should be able to move to do this, and it's something nobody's ever heard of and nobody's ever seen, so it'll look different on the screen than any other guy who's worn a Batman costume or a superhero costume. He won't move the same. He'll look very different. Versus like Black Panther, who Chadwick Boseman did an amazing performance as Black Panther. However, watching Black Panther, I could identify specifically which martial arts they pulled from in order to choreograph his fight scenes. I could go, well, that's capoeira, that's taekwondo, and so on and so forth. throughout the entire thing. But watching Christian Bale's scenes as Batman, you're like, what is this? I have no idea what this is. Well, it's called Casey Fight Method, or KFM. So, you know, I couldn't tell you. I know two guys founded it together as a team. I don't know either of their names. So that's kind of where I'm like, well, these guys don't quite fit the bill because they're not famous enough themselves to get that kind of Bruce Lee spotlight. But yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
There's a lot of fad systems out there, and quick learn systems, and Bruce Lee was sort of like the PhD of the martial arts, right? I think he really studied it in a level that few people do, even like some of the lifelong martial artists that we've known. I just don't think they're quite at the same level as Bruce was, right? Maybe no one ever was or will be again.
Well, you can practice something for 20 years, or you can practice something for you can practice it for 20 years and continue to grow in skill, or you can practice year 2 20 times.
Right. Yeah. Certainly. Yeah. Training is not all equal, and people's attitudes about it are not all equal either. So, yeah, gosh, I don't know. Like, the question we asked at the beginning was, do we need another Bruce Lee? I mean, I think my answer, I guess, as we're kind of winding this discussion down here, would be we don't need one. I think, self-defense martial arts are continuing to advance. They're out there. They're not going away. Maybe they're not growing as fast as we want to, but we'll survive, right? I mean, this will survive in the absence of another Bruce Lee. I think we just really, really want another Bruce Lee, right? Yeah. We'll be okay. We'll be okay, but sure would be nice to have another.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of what this boils down to is there's not a necessity. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe that is exactly the problem. Is because we don't need one, we won't get one. Maybe that's exactly the problem. Would we like one? Would I like one? Absolutely. You bet I would. But maybe you just found the exact reason why we aren't going to have one is because there isn't, in fact, the necessity to invent him or her. Let's be PC here.
Right. Yes. I think what we do need is people who continue to carry that torch, right? Like we've talked about people who do, maybe these KC guys you're talking about are an example. I think there are other great martial artists that are an example of putting the good parts of things together and really keeping it practical and keeping it effective. I think our own Grandmaster Pellegrini did a excellent job of doing that with his system, and that needs to continue, right? We do need that. We need people who are going to look at this, understand the history, understand the practicality, and continue to advance the overall martial arts in that way, right?
Yeah.
Do we need a single champion? I guess maybe we don't need one, like I said before, but we really want one, but we don't need one. I think we need people who are going to keep each other honest too, because there are a lot of people who are, again, motivated commercially or for whatever reason, they're making their own stuff up, and it's not good stuff. I'm not calling anybody out specifically, but there's a lot of systems of martial arts that doesn't take long to figure out that they're not very practical.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I made the comment in class tonight while I was kind of wrapping up things, which was I asked my students if they could use a specific series of techniques to defend themselves, and everybody raised their hand, and I called them on it completely, like, oh, really? You could, huh? Yeah, I could. You could? Really? I didn't tell you how you were being attacked. What makes you think you can use that specific set of techniques in order to defend yourself when you don't know how you're being attacked? And they all kind of blinked for a second and looked at me. I said, I know I can defend myself using those exact techniques. And I waited for the inevitable question, which is, well, why can I do it? The reason is because I can use those techniques in more than one scenario. I gave a half dozen scenarios where I used the exact same two techniques in rapid succession, and they were anything from a strike to a kick to a grab and so on and so forth. I know how to apply these in all these because I've taken the time to work on that. And then I told the students, listen, I looked at some of the children and I said, do you have pop quizzes in school? And yeah, we have pop quizzes in school. I said, great. Do you know what a martial artist calls a pop quiz? And one of my black belts looks at me, he goes, a fight. I said, darn right, that's what a pop quiz is. If you can't do it in a fight, then you can't do it. It's that simple. And if you don't practice it, then you're never going to be able to use it.
Yeah, so got to keep it real. That's a big thing for the martial arts, specifically the practical martial arts, right?
Yep.
Well, I'm finding myself feeling pretty nostalgic right now. I may go and have to watch a Bruce Lee film in the next couple days or so here. But yeah,
Yeah.
So to bring it home, I think Bruce Lee was an inspiration, an innovator, and I think he laid a lot of the groundwork that the modern martial arts, particularly self-defense-based martial arts, are built on.
Yeah.
And we miss having that kind of champion.
Really though, whether you love him or you hate him, if Bruce Lee made you think at any point in time, if you listened enough to think, then I think he did his job. Okay, it's okay whether you disagree or you agree with his philosophy or his stances on things, but if you cared enough to hear what his argument was on things and to think about it, whether you agreed or you disagreed, is maybe irrelevant. If at least it made you think and challenged you to maybe pressure test what it is you already knew and either come away feeling assured because it works or came away going, maybe I should look into this more because maybe I can improve my technique.
Yeah, very true. You don't, like we touched on before, you don't have to agree with someone to learn from them, right? So, excellent point. Yeah. I am super excited to know, we just really are scratching the surface of Bruce Lee and this topic that we brought up today about, martial arts celebrity and their impact on the overall martial arts world. Really excited to see if any of our listeners have any comments, what they have to say, what questions they have, what thoughts they have on the topic. So,
and maybe you have already identified who the next Bruce Lee is, and we're missing the boat. Maybe Brian and I both are completely unaware of the one who's out there, and maybe you can point them out to us.
Absolutely. So do that, please. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Leave us a like. Anything to help us get some more visibility to our channel, we really appreciate.
Please share.
Thanks for watching. Yes, please share. Next time, we are going to discuss real-world things that have affected your martial arts training and or teaching. So certainly in a lifelong endeavor like this, you're going to go through some things and talk about what some of those things have been and how we've managed through it.
Yeah, it should be really fun.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. We're going to sign this one off. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks.